So our Verballer Top 12 is out. We continue to have more votes than ever on this thing. And I was thinking maybe at some point, either this coming week or next, I'm gonna open it up to the entirety of the Verballerhood.
Wow.
Just 1 week only.
A special.
Yeah. Verballer Top 12 for week 10, though.
All right.
Number 12, Texas A&M.
Okay.
Number 11, Tennessee. Number 10, BYU. Number 9, Iowa State. 2 Big 12 teams. Number 8, Clemson. Number 7, Indiana. Number 6, Texas. Number 5, Miami. 4, Ohio State. 3, Penn State. 2, Georgia. 1, your Oregon Ducks. Any reaction to any of that?
I personally would have Texas A&M in terms of the body of their work ahead of Tennessee. Is that crazy to you?
No.
Given their win against LSU, given a better loss than what Tennessee has this year with Arkansas, Texas A&M with Notre Dame, that loss has aged decently well. Obviously, Notre Dame has a blemish on its schedule they'd rather not have. Otherwise, I don't know. I'd hesitate to put Indiana ahead of Texas just because of Indiana's schedule right now, through no fault of their own, obviously taking care of business with or without Curtis Rourke.
Indiana is not ahead of Texas. Indiana is 7.
No, I'm
Texas
saying
is
I'd
6.
hesitate to put Indiana ahead of Texas.
Oh, my God.
If I were looking at this and looking at what I'd change, so I'm saying this is okay by me.
Yeah, well, so what I think the overarching takeaway is for me is how different this is from the AP Top 25.
Yes.
Indiana is number 13 in the AP poll. It's obviously much higher in ours. Notre Dame is 8 in ours. They are 13th, or 8th in the AP, 13th in ours. Tennessee is much higher as well. Texas A&M is a couple spots higher in the AP than it is in the Verballer Top 12. Of course, none of these are actually right at this point. It's really a subjective measure. It doesn't count for anything. But it is interesting to compare and contrast because there are plenty of similarities, but then with respect, I think, to the teams outside of the top 5, that's where you start to see differences among the people voting. It does not surprise me that our Verballerhood, which of course has deep respect for teams like Iowa State and BYU and more recently Indiana, I don't doubt that there is any kind of Verballer bump going on with respect to those teams. So there are differences, and that was the main takeaway. Again, I don't read too deeply into polling as a whole. Just worth pointing out here as we talk through the Verballer Top 12 for Week 10.
Okay, so my only note here is my continued contextual skepticism about Penn State. I think Penn State's a good team. I think Penn State is potentially a very good team because anytime you have what can be a dominant defense when healthy, that just lifts you pretty high in my book. I don't know what the analogy is here. I don't know, does Penn State have a gear? Does Penn State have a throttle, right? When you're talking about a top 3, 4, 5-ish team, you want to point to something and say, and they don't have to have one of the best 3 offenses in America, something like that. But you want to point to a week where you're like, yeah, that's when they puff their chest out as a top 3, 4 team. Do you have that sense for Penn State this year? Has there been that throttle? I don't feel like it was, obviously not Bowling Green. Don't feel like it was UCLA. Don't feel like it was Illinois. And now we've seen what, what Oregon has played UCLA and Illinois, what that throttle looks like. And it seems Oregon's better than Penn State, so that's fine. That's my skepticism with Penn State given their ranking. Much better to be undefeated than not. Penn State is undefeated. Do you get the sense that there is that throttle within for Penn State?
Well, the throttle question's interesting.
Because I see it with a lot of the teams around them.
Sure. They beat West Virginia very soundly, but that was week 1.
It's West Virginia.
Beat them very, very soundly. That's a game that comes to mind. I often reference the Illinois game, which was not necessarily the prettiest game. They won by 14 points, but that was one that felt like they won by, in my opinion, a much larger margin.
I know, but it's not a vibe scoreboard, Ty. It's a scoreboard. Yeah.
I understand. You could argue that the way that they were going against Wisconsin was very encouraging, and they maybe were getting closer to that next gear that you bring up. Because whether it was Drew Aller, Bo Prabula, one way or another, that game very much felt like it was teetering on the brink of Penn State cracking it open.
It's Halloween, though. Right? It's Halloween. We're 9 weeks into the season.
I get it.
Like, you can't lose a race and be like, hypothetically, though, that race went a lot better than people are going to realize afterwards. Like, okay, cool.
They may just not be that kind of team. You know, it's been an interesting experiment this season with a new offense that I think has gradually come along, with a rushing attack that has definitely gotten more explosive, with a passing game that still leans a little too heavily on Tyler Warren, their playmaking tight end, and doesn't have go-to options out wide in the same way. Julian Fleming makes a big catch, has a bad drop. Harrison Wallace has gotten targets, has been good for the most part this season for Penn State. I think Drew Aller as a passer has certainly improved, and we have seen development on that front. But at the end of the day, it's not an explosive passing offense, not yet. And we'll see what that does against a team like an Ohio State this weekend. I have my assumptions. I need to dig into the data to form a deeper opinion on things. But this will be the game that should provide answers to all of the questions you desire.
I appreciate that. Like, if we are talking strictly about how good we think a team is Halloween week in conjunction with their record and obviously their resume, but what they've shown lately these past few weeks, it almost seems like there's a case for Texas A&M as like a top 5, 6, 7 team, right? Like, they didn't fully separate from Mississippi State, but their performance against LSU, certainly their performance taking care of business against Mizzou a few weeks ago, and it was a different Mizzou team that played Alabama. I know they've struggled of late, but there is something about Texas A&M, and they beat Arkansas, which is something Tennessee can't say. And it wasn't a big win. It was, 4 or 5 points. But if we're just in a vacuum looking at where teams are right now, I think I might take Texas A&M against Iowa State. I think I would take them against BYU in this moment. I know I'm going to be accused of disrespecting the Big 12 and BYU and Iowa State, but with how they're performing right now, I don't know. I think there's a case to be made that we should be a little bit more fluid with how we think about this top 12.
It's a good defense at A&M.
Yeah.
There's no denying it's a good defense, and I think the defense is still the most consistent part of the team as they're trying to get a little bit more consistency on the offensive side of the ball.
Definitely.
You know, and it just so happens that the Marcel Reed thing worked out. I don't know if you saw some of the post-game comments from the LSU side pretty much indicating that they had not prepared for Marcel Reed. If it looked like they didn't have an answer, it's because they quite literally did not.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they've got options like that they can bring in a pinch to try and get things going. In this case, Marcel Reed absolutely provided a spark that makes him dangerous. And I think Mike Elko is a hell of a coach. He's already shown that he can make this team better over the course of a season. So I would probably be a little bit more bullish on A&M than our poll here, which has them all the way down at 12.
Yeah.
By the way, just for reference, Notre Dame at 13, Bama at 14, Boise at 15, Pitt at 16 right now. So obviously, Notre Dame is a team that, just by virtue of others losing, will find its way into our top 12, I think, before the end of the season, provided they don't drop a game. Boise State's got, I think, a pretty clear path at this point now that they cleared the UNLV hurdle.
Agree.
To get back into that Mountain West Championship game, most likely against UNLV again. They will continue to move up a little bit, I think, in this poll. And Pitt has a chance to really jump up this week. Pitt and SMU play on Saturday night in a huge game with ACC relevance. Depending on who wins that game, I would expect them to maybe jump up on the fringes of the top 12, if not push somebody else out. But as I said at the top, and I mean it, now as we get into November, it's going to get weird. It's going to get weird.
You're not going to like me saying it, Ty, but there is a team with a throttle that's not here, and that's Notre Dame. What Notre Dame has done lately is, whether or not Navy ends up ranked by the end of the year, they're going to end up with a very good record, and they beat them by, if my state college math works out here, it's 37 points away from home, not in a full road environment, but away from home, they win by 37. They beat Georgia Tech and their backup quarterback. Yes, that was a Zach Pyron, Georgia Tech. That's 18 points. Stanford by 42. A decent Louisville team by a touchdown. You know, comfortably beat Miami of Ohio. Beat Purdue by 59 points.
Killed them.
We're right there with Northern Illinois. Right there, Ty. Laugh all you want. Notre Dame was in position to win that game, and the Texas A&M win has grown magnificently for the Irish. So, again, I like a throttle in my top 12 teams, and so I'd put them, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 in there.
They have gotten better. They absolutely have gotten better. So if you want to vote in the Verballer Top 12 poll, I'm not sure yet when I'll extend the invite out to the entirety of the Verballerhood. Probably either this weekend or next. Just to play it safe, going out to verballers.com, sign up as a certified or premium Verballer, support what Dan and I do.
Yes.
Be much appreciated. Of course, if you sign up, you'll have an opportunity to vote in this poll every week, not just the one-offs.